Welcome back. The Surviving Sepsis Campaign has just released its 2026 updated guidelines, and the emergency medicine community has been paying close attention. For our listeners managing sepsis at the bedside every day, why does this update matter, and what's the headline change they should know about first?
This is a meaningful update. The 2026 guidelines, published in March in Critical Care Medicine, carry forward the core framework but sharpen several recommendations based on accumulated evidence. One of the most immediately actionable additions is the endorsement of a standardized sepsis screening tool. The guideline now explicitly suggests using a screening tool over not using one, though the certainty of evidence is rated as very low. That low certainty doesn't necessarily mean the data is poor. It may simply reflect the absence of large prospective trials. Screening tools like QSO-FA or institutional sepsis alerts are already widely used, and this statement validates that approach. The underlying message is, systematic identification matters, and it should be built into workflow, not left to clinical intuition alone.
Let's move to hemodynamic targets, because MAP goals have been debated for years. The 2026 guidelines appear to refine the target range. What should clinicians take away from that?
This is a nuanced but important shift. The 2026 guidelines maintain the recommendation for an initial MAP target above 65 mmHg. That hasn't changed, but they now describe allowing a range within 5 mmHg of that threshold, which in practice suggests a working target of roughly 60 to 70 mmHg rather than a fixed number. The implication is that rigid pursuit of a higher MAP in all patients is not supported. For patients 65 and older, the guideline specifically suggests a target of 60 to 65 mmHg over higher ranges, backed by low-certainty evidence. This aligns with data suggesting that pushing MAP well above 65 in older patients may increase the risk of atrial fibrillation and other complications without clear mortality benefit. So, the bedside take is, individualize, don't overshoot, and be especially conservative in elderly patients.
Antibiotic stewardship is always a tension in the emergency department. You want to be fast, but also appropriate. The 2026 guidelines introduce some new guidance on antibiotic coverage, particularly around anaerobic organisms. Can you walk us through that?
This is an area where the 2026 guidelines are quite specific, and it's practically useful. The new statement suggests using empiric antibiotics without anaerobic coverage by default, unless the patient has identifiable risk factors for anaerobic infection. The risk factors they list are clinically sensible, intra-abdominal or gynecological obstetric source, necrotizing soft tissue infections, head and neck infections, or CNS abscess or emphysema. If none of those apply, the guideline suggests streamlining coverage. That said, the guideline is clear that if a broader agent, such as piperacillin tazobactam, is needed for other reasons, such as suspected resistant organisms, its use remains appropriate. This isn't about removing piperacillin tazobactam from the emergency department toolkit, it's about being intentional. The certainty here is very low, so clinical judgment still governs. But for the typical community-acquired sepsis patient with no obvious anaerobic risk factor, routine anaerobic coverage may not be necessary. There's also an important update on pre-hospital antibiotics. For patients with likely septic shock where pre-hospital transport time exceeds 60 minutes, the guideline now suggests initiating antibiotics in the field, but only when a validated sepsis screening tool has been applied. That's a meaningful qualifier. It's not a blanket recommendation for all pre-hospital patients, but it opens the door for EMS-initiated therapy in prolonged transport scenarios.
The guideline also revisits some of its 2021 positions, specifically around vasopressors, fluid choice, and antifungal therapy. There appear to be both upgrades and downgrades in evidence strength. What are the most clinically relevant changes there?
There are several worth unpacking. On vasopressors, norepinephrine remains the first-line agent. That's unchanged. However, the evidence for preferring norepinephrine over vasopressin has been downgraded from a recommendation to a conditional suggestion with low certainty. And for epinephrine as an add-on when MAP remains inadequate, despite norepinephrine and vasopressin, the evidence has dropped to very low certainty. This doesn't mean these agents are no longer appropriate. It means the evidence base is thinner than we previously classified, and clinicians should apply informed judgment rather than algorithmic reflex. On fluids, the 2026 guidelines now suggest using crystalloids alone over crystalloids with supplemental albumin, a shift from the 2021 guidance which conditionally supported albumin when large volumes of crystalloid had already been given. The evidence for this is moderate certainty, which is relatively strong for sepsis literature. The exception remains patients with cirrhosis or those who have received very large crystalloid volumes. The key downgrade to note for emergency departments specifically is corticosteroids in septic shock. Evidence certainty has moved from moderate to low. The practice of using IV hydrocortisone in refractory septic shock remains a conditional suggestion, but clinicians should recognize that the data supporting it is weaker than previously characterized. One upgrade worth highlighting: the recommendation to de-escalate antibiotics to the narrowest appropriate agent once culture and sensitivity results are available has been strengthened from conditional to a strong recommendation. This is actionable at the 24 to 48-hour mark and is one area where emergency physicians can work with their inpatient colleagues to build better handoff culture.
For our listeners who work in ICUs or step-down units, the guideline apparently introduces something new around fluid management after the acute phase. What's the update there?
After successful initial resuscitation, the 2026 guidelines now suggest active fluid removal using diuretics, ultrafiltration, or dialysis where appropriate to manage fluid balance going forward. This is a new statement, albeit with very low certainty evidence. It reflects a growing body of literature suggesting that positive fluid balance maintained beyond the initial resuscitation phase is independently associated with worse outcomes. The guideline doesn't prescribe a specific fluid removal target or timing, but it signals a direction. The goal is not simply to pour in fluids and move on. Once perfusion is restored, the question becomes how to prevent the harms of fluid accumulation, pulmonary edema, abdominal compartment syndrome, impaired wound healing. This is more relevant to the ICU team managing the patient 24 to 72 hours in, but it's valuable context for emergency physicians handing over care. There's also a new suggestion around selective digestive decontamination, using non-absorbable oral antibiotics to reduce intestinal bacterial load in mechanically ventilated adults, but specifically only in ICU settings with a low prevalence of antimicrobial resistance. Given how rare that condition is in high-resistance environments, its practical applicability will vary significantly by institution.
To close, let's give our listeners a clean summary of what their practice should look like based on these updates. What are the 2 or 3 things they should walk into their next shift thinking about?
3 things. First, start screening systematically. The guidelines now formally endorse using a sepsis screening tool, and while the evidence certainty is low, the operational logic is sound. If your department doesn't have a structured pathway, this update is a prompt to build one. Second, recalibrate your antibiotic reflex. Default to agents without anaerobic coverage unless the clinical picture clearly suggests an anaerobic source, and revisit that decision when cultures return, because de-escalation is now a strong recommendation, not merely a good idea. Third, be precise about your MAP target. Targeting 65 mmHg as a threshold is supported. Chasing numbers significantly above that, particularly in older patients, is not. Treat the patient in front of you, not the number on the monitor. The 2026 guidelines reflect an ongoing effort to align practice with the best available evidence, and that evidence, while often limited in certainty, is pointing us toward more individualized, stewardship-conscious care.
Dr. Wang, this has been an excellent breakdown of a complex document. The 2026 Surviving Sepsis Campaign guidelines give our listeners a great deal to think about, from screening and antibiotic selection to MAP targets and the evolving evidence around vasopressors and fluids. Thank you for joining us today, and to our listeners worldwide, and we'll see you in the next episode.